On this week's episode of TechSNAP, the NSA chilling effect is in full force, and you can probably guess where companies are fleeing to. Then it's the hidden problems facing IT and why end users expect magic. Then a great big batch of your questions and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 144 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on January 9th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, GoDaddy, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this show goes on. And our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Here we are, Alan, second episode of 2014. And guess what, Alan? Big show today. We got a big show, Alan. I know you weren't expecting it, but it just happened. Well, you might have been expecting it. Hey, I noticed that behind you right now, there is a copious amount of hardware. Look at that. I can see some SSDs. I see a super micro box, right? I can see...
I'm building a new encoding machine for BSD now.
Very nice. Good stuff. Dual SSDs, huh?
Yeah. So I opted to mirror the SSDs for the OS and stuff, and not have a regular spinning hard drive. I'll just connect to my giant ZFS arrays in the basement. Yeah,
that's a great way to go. And you've got good throughput.
Well, because on top of the existing one I had, which is 6 3-terabyte SSDs in Z2, I remember I bought that used machine off eBay and stuck a dozen 3-terabyte drives in it.
Yeah.
So I'll have a lot of storage, and it'll be really, really fast. And I don't see the purpose of putting a spinning hard drive in my computer anymore.
I know. It really is getting to that point, isn't it? Especially if you have a network storage. Then it really changes.
Yeah, and Supermicro motherboard with dual gigabit NICs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's going to fly. Oh, yeah, that's going to be good.
I just need to get more internet or more network connections. And
yeah.
In addition to that machine, I also bought 1,000 feet of Cat 6 cable to add more lines because there's not enough lines.
So you got a project ahead of you is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has kind of been an exciting week because we've been getting trickle-in pictures of folks who've received their Jupiter Broadcasting hoodie or T-shirts. Yep. And so I just wanted to put a special call out there. Here's Michael right here. He sent me a picture yesterday on G+. And if you've gotten a Jupiter Broadcasting hoodie or shirt, send us a picture. Email it into Angela@jupiterbroadcasting.com or post it on your favorite social network and tag either her or myself. And we'd love to see it. She's at Angers on ANGERZ or Z on Twitter. Is it still Z if it's part of a name?
Yep.
Okay.
It's the name of the letter.
Right.
If you're spelling it out, it's Z.
Okay, all right. So Anger...
Pronouncing it, it's Z, like zebra.
Okay, so it's not Anger Z, right? Okay, I got it.
Right.
Okay. So we'd love to get your pictures. We're compiling those and putting them together for something special. So if you got your hoodie, snap a picture. I mean, come on. Everybody's phone has a camera on it. Everybody. So just do it real quick. We'd love to see it. All right, Alan. Well, I think our first story this week, now be honest, did it make you just kind of crack a smile a little bit? Did you kind of smirk and be like, well, what do you expect?
I was more like, money.
That's right. Probably not too surprising to some of you. It looks like perhaps companies are getting a little uncomfortable with the NSA spying policies and are moving to safer grounds. What's going on, Alan?
Yes. Companies have started moving their data and cloud storage and things like that and jobs to Canada to avoid the NSA.
Oh, geez. This is not good for the economy.
Not your economy.
No.
Really good for mine.
Damn it.
Yes. U.S. industry stands to lose billions as companies spooked by security leaks seek to store banks of personal data outside of the U.S. Some of them even had to do... This kind of trend has been going on since before all this NSA stuff, right? Even like DMCA and Patriot Act stuff was meaning that companies were looking at storing their data somewhere else.
Right. We've talked about that before.
Especially when it's European companies who just have offices in the States or do business in the States and have to store the data.
Right.
And they don't, for performance reasons, they don't want to store it back in Europe because the latency is too high. But, storing it in Toronto instead of Chicago, the latency difference is very, very small.
Okay, so I guess the first question, I've already seen it come up in the chat room too, is doesn't being in a foreign country actually give you less protections from the NSA because there's at least some laws in place?
Well, the NSA makes it easier for them to spy, more legal for them to spy on data going out of the country, but they can't tap the line at the data center when the data center is not in the States.
They can't issue a national security letter to a Canadian telco, for example.
Exactly. And they can't just, latch onto Google's fibers between two of its data centers if both data centers are in Canada.
Okay. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, it makes me a little more comfortable that Jupiter Broadcasting's, at least we're kind of all over the world, but Scale Engine itself is a Canadian company, and that's, for me, it's a little more comforting.
Yep. And they say, quote, "It's also a question of perception, right? The Europeans want to say that their clients' information is not in the United States, although keeping it in North America means that they don't have performance problems or even legal problems." They say Canada is also attractive due to the availability of skilled labor, right? It's easy to find sysadmins and things like that in Canada.
Yeah.
We have a lot of good schools and so on. We have a cooler climate, which means that data centers require less air conditioning.
That's true, too.
And abundant, cheap electricity.
And you guys are nice on top of that.
Hydroelectric on top of clean nuclear and so on.
And friendly while you're doing it.
Yep. And, compared to moving the data to Europe, you don't have the latency problems and the proximity problems or just other problems.
It would seem to me that if anything is going to push forward reforms in the NSA's behavior and policies, it would be this sort of corporate level backlash where the people who have lobbying groups,
like IBM losing billions of dollars because of it.
Yeah, exactly. That seems like
your Cisco's and your Dells and HP getting upset over it, then maybe something will change.
Right, exactly. We can hope. In fact, it is impacting Cisco too, isn't it?
Yep, and Cisco's responding to that. That's 2 bullet points away. Settle down.
Okay. All right, simmer down now.
So no one will say exactly which companies have decided to flee the U.S. so far, but it's said to vary from European banking and insurance firms that have operations in the U.S. To even American oil and gas companies and retail outlets that don't want their data being stolen, according to Industry Canada representatives interviewed by the newspaper that did the story. And then there was a separate but related story that Cisco has chosen Ontario as the destination for a $4 billion investment in a new research and development complex.
Wow.
So they'll be creating about 1,700 new engineering and tech jobs initially.
Wow.
And about half, more than half of the $4 billion will be spent just on salaries. And then the rest is on, buildings and infrastructure, and they're like sponsoring the Pan Am Games and a bunch of other things. They also expect that the number of jobs could grow as high as 5,000 by the end of the 10-year deal.
Jeez, that's great for Ontario.
Yes, and specifically, Cisco's like, well, we saw what happened when the NSA doing shenanigans, and if we were to say build the routers in Canada and ship them directly from Canada to somebody else, it's a lot harder for the NSA to intercept the shipment and install hardware malware.
Yeah, in fact, Cisco cited, like you mentioned, all the skilled workers and stuff, but he said, one of their spokespersons said, our company believes Canada is a great place to invest. Canada is uniquely qualified and positioned to be an outstanding source for innovation and at the forefront of transforming the world. Wow.
Well, and specifically mentions the best, very good technical and business schools.
Mm-hmm. This is something that the NSA is going to have to, this is the problem, and this is perhaps one of the motivators they wanted to keep it secret, because they probably knew this would happen. And the other thing is, this is just one element of a multifaceted fallout we're going to see. You're going to see, like, we've already saw Brazil that wants to design their network so that way they completely avoid the U.S. whenever possible. And essentially... Yep.
And, we also saw the Brazil cancel its contract with Boeing, or...
Right.
Not Boeing. What's the other one?
Was it Airbus?
Lockheed Martin.
Okay, yeah.
I know. Lockheed Martin did not buy F-35s and instead bought the Swedish ones or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the beginning of the fallouts for sure. 2014 will probably see a lot of this, I bet. I bet that's, maybe the NSA revelations will slow down, but now the story will evolve to the companies that are abandoning the U.S. potentially. And then again, maybe we'll keep getting leaks, which just accelerate this abandonment of the U.S. And I can't imagine, like, everybody's going to do it.
It's going to be hard to measure some of these financial losses because it's just going to be people don't consider a U.S. company in their list of companies when they're going to bid on something.
Or the next time you build a facility, you just don't build it in the U.S. The next time you hire 1,000 people, you just don't hire in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a direct removal from the economy. Yeah, you're right. That will be a lot harder to measure.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this story?
No, that's about it for that one.
All right, well, let me tell you about something that is awesome to measure, and that is IX Systems, sponsor of this week's episode of TechSNAP. IX Systems is the hardware vendor of Scale Engine and really anybody who's serious. They're enterprise servers and storage for open source. So if you're serious in this space, this is a company you need to look at. They have a track record in the community, and they have a track record making really high quality stuff. So get started by going over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Take a look around on their site. Not only do they have incredible servers and incredible storage solutions, but they're also champions of open source. And I think a lot of people watching the show really appreciate that. And you know me, I'm somebody who always says one of the best ways to be involved with companies that support open source and push that agenda forward, like FreeBSD on servers and things like that, is to vote with your wallet. That's the greatest impact we can have. But it's not just about that. IX Systems will build systems specifically after talking with you and tailoring it to your needs, and then they'll do burn-in testing to help minimize dead on arrival units and all kinds of things. Alan, I know you're a huge IX Systems fan.
For sure. And, you know, they even do desktop. Like if you need a workstation, you can get a really nice workstation built as well. Michael Lucas, who writes a lot of books about BSD, was looking to build a machine so he could write his next book. And, you know, he's like, instead of trying to cobble together enough hardware, I need a machine that's going to have like 8 hard drives and all this stuff in order to work on his next book. And so he went to IX and they custom built him a nice workstation.
Yeah, and what's really cool about them is when you're discussing what you want to accomplish, IX System realizes that it is in their best interest to really zero in on the perfect solution. And they won't oversell you, they won't undersell you. They have experts who genuinely know what you're trying to accomplish. They truly understand the technology behind it. Some of them are the creators of the technology you'll be using in your deployment, so they really know what they're talking about. And they understand that the happier you are, the more likely you are to come back.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest differences. Like when I was building my big storage server, if I had just called up Dell, the salesperson I talked to wouldn't have been able to tell me, you know, what the best RAID configuration was for that many drives, or, you know, talk about the options of which SAS controller I should go with, and, you know, what are the actual technical problems with using SATA drives instead of SAS drives, and give me all the information I need to make that decision myself. Instead of, you know, just saying, well, we refuse to build it that way for you.
And, you know, the customer list of IX Systems speaks for itself. Scale Engine, Mozilla, TiVo, Sony, Hitachi, NASA, Adobe. Look at all of these names. Disney. Lots
of big schools.
VMware, like that. GM, Juniper. All of these are IX Systems customers. Justin.tv, Twitch.tv, LinkedIn, Tumblr. Hey, look, there's Scale Engine right there. Evernote. This is a good list to be on, and there's a reason why these companies are choosing IX Systems. So here's how you can get started and get a little more information. Go to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. That lets them know that you heard about it here on this show. And why don't you go ahead and grab this ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. This is something that will help you make the correct decisions when you're purchasing hardware. It's a free white paper you can download by putting your name and your email, and that'll also let them know that you were paying attention to the TechSNAP program and appreciate them sponsoring us. And it's a good little bit of information for you. Now, this white paper, was it commissioned for IX Systems? How did they get this?
Somebody else wrote it for them. I don't know if they commissioned it, but it was done independently. So
go check it out.
It's very good.
ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. And a really big thank you to IX Systems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
They have quite the array of stuff, right? You can go from like little short depth servers and the little like desktop style FreeNAS Mini like you have, all the way up to like the giant 4U36 hard drive server that I have. Yeah,
Batnoob is asking right now in the chat room. I think you just answered his question. I have a FreeNAS Mini, and it is one of the best pieces of kit I've gotten in years. It is so awesome too, because I started the process with them, and during the buying process, we got into the conversation of like, well, how much RAM do I need for a ZFS array of this size? And, you know, to be honest, I was overshooting it. I was really, truly overshooting it. And they worked with me to narrow it in right to what I needed. And the box has been rock solid. I mean, rock solid. So go check them out, ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Thank you, IX Systems.
Yep.
Okay, Alan, well, moving forward, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle around the RSA conference, right?
Yes. So the RSA conference is a big yearly conference hosted by RSA, the company that was originally started by the guys that came up with the algorithm and so on. And I think they're expecting, I think I had the number here.
Yeah.
They're expecting 560 different speakers based on the talks and the panels.
Yeah.
And expecting more than 24,000 participants originally until the kerfuffle happened. A couple of weeks ago, it came out that the RSA might have received $10 million from the NSA to make that dual EC-RGB algorithm, the random number generator that the NSA purposely made bad so they could break it.
Right.
As the default for some of their software at RSA. If you remember, we covered it back in September when the RSA came out and announced that you shouldn't use that option in our product. Manually select something other than the default because the default one is bad. And
then I guess somebody
Snowden documents basically showed that they might have got paid to make it the default.
Right, and then I believe somebody went through and actually dug up their old SEC filings and found the $10 million payment.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so it was kind of caught red-handed once they found that.
Yeah. So the RSA denies that it entered into a contract for the purpose of weakening its products. It seems that just pure speculation that they were under the impression that the money was just to promote the algorithm, right? Because the NSA, once RSA adopted it as the default, the NSA kind of used that to market it to other people, right? And to say, if you want your encryption to be compatible with one we use here at the government, you need to do dual EC or whatever. Mm-hmm. So RSA might not have known that the NSA was specifically weakening it, right? And they go on to say, when we made this the default back in, I think it was 2004 or 1994, something like that. Back when they did it, the NSA was considered to be on the side of corporate security, not against it.
Okay, I mean, I guess people did. Yeah, okay. People thought it's within the nation's best interest to make corporations secure, so they must be trying to help us. But it seems like the people who are boycotting these conferences don't believe this story. They think the RSA knew all along. And to be clear, I kind of agree with them because, I mean, this is what these guys do.
RSA, well, also, most of them were just angry that RSA didn't come out and admit it. They made this kind of non-denial denial thing.
Right.
Corporate doublespeak rather than just saying, what the thing is.
Yeah.
But, it's not really the original RSA company anymore, right? It's part of EMC and it's just a big corporate thing. And so, of course, it makes big corporate mistakes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I mentioned, back in September, RSA issued a warning against using the flawed algorithm in their product when NIST issued a similar warning after the Snowden documents came out and showed that algorithm was vulnerable. So I have just a short list of people who've pulled out of the conference, who are going to be giving talks or taking part in panels or both. The first was Mikko Hyppönen, who's F-Secure's chief researcher. So he works at an antivirus company. And he was giving a talk called Governments as Malware Authors. Kind of seems fitting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Also, Adam Langley, who's a Google security expert. Chris Palmer, who's a security engineer with Google Chrome.
So 2 Google devs saying no thanks.
Christopher Sohain, can't pronounce that, who's a researcher with the American Civil Liberties Union. Marcia Hoffman, who's a privacy attorney and used to work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Alex Fowler, who's the Mozilla privacy and public policy expert. Josh Thompson, who's the chief breaking officer at a security firm called Redis.
Chief breaking officer. That's an awesome title.
It is. And Jeffrey Carr, who works for TAI Global.
Yeah, and what was interesting about his post...
blog posts kind of urging people to just boycott the conference altogether.
Yeah, he starts it out with a title, NSA's $10 million RSA contract, The Origins. And then he goes into it, and he says, for almost 10 years, I've been going toe-to-toe with these people. And, I mean, these people are mad about this.
Yes.
And, the real crime here is the weakening of the standard, which weakens everyone, right?
Yes. Well, specifically, the standard for the software to be allowed to be used by the government said that this algorithm had to be included. It didn't specify it had to be the default, but it had to be an option. And so that means that any software that was built so that the government would be able to use it has this weakness built into it. And it makes all those products look bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess they're hoping to make a statement with this, but the flip side of the argument would be, well, if you really wanted to engage, you should go and discuss it with them, I guess is what people might counter it with. Yeah.
That's what they're trying to say. But,
yeah.
There are plenty of other security conferences where we can all get together and rail against RSA without giving them any of our money. Right?
Very true. Yeah.
Yep. And then, interestingly, when I was looking up Jeffrey Carr, the company he works for is developing a product called the Chimera, which is a commercial database of rival state research and development projects. So their idea here is to put together a database of what the state actors and like large hacking groups are working on. So what technology is China currently trying to develop, and using that as a basis to know when someone's doing advanced persistent threat or trying to hack into your network, which files specifically are they going to be after? Mm-hmm. Like
practical things.
Yeah. We know China's trying to build stealth fighters, so obviously those files at Lockheed Martin were sensitive, and then they got broken into by those RSA keys that got stolen. In a completely unrelated story.
Yeah. Interesting. The guy from F-Secure, he made his announcement Christmas morning.
Yes, he has an open letter. Then he has an amendment to it at the bottom as well.
These guys are angry. I mean, when you make an announcement like that on Christmas morning, you do it because you've been stewing on it and you're angry about it.
Yep.
And these guys.
Well, because he goes on, it's a short thing, I guess it says. So he writes specifically to the CEO and executive chairman of RSA. He says, I don't expect you to know who I am, but I've been working with computer security since '91, and I do a lot of public speaking on the topic. And he's spoken 8 times at the RSA conference, either in US, Europe, or Japan. The RSA's even pictured his face on the walls of their conference.
Oh, wow.
He's industry expert, right?
Yeah.
And he says, on December 20th, Reuters broke a story alleging that your company accepted a random number generator from the NSA in exchange for money. And it goes on. He says, as my reaction to this, I'm canceling my talk at the RSA conference in San Francisco in February. He says, aptly enough, the talk won't be delivered at RSA was titled Governments as Malware Authors. He says, I don't really expect your multi-billion-dollar company or your multi-million-dollar conference to suffer as a result of your deals with the NSA. In fact, I'm not expecting other conference speakers to cancel. Most of your speakers are Americans anyway. Why would they care about surveillance that's not targeted at them but at non-Americans? Whereas Mikko Hyppinen is Finnish, right? Mm-hmm. He says, surveillance operations from the U.S. intelligence agencies are targeted at foreigners. However, I'm a foreigner.
Yeah.
And I'm withdrawing my support for your event.
Seriously. I mean, we in the States really, I think, often forget for people outside of the U.S., this is even more of a serious problem in a sense of monitoring, right? Yeah. I'm glad somebody's taking a public stand about this, because we need more bad PR around this kind of stuff, more people talking about this kind of stuff, and we need the industry to be slightly uncomfortable with this cozy relationship they have with the NSA right now. I mean, they've been living the high life. They've been taking money. They've been intentionally or unintentionally weakening their products, and now they got caught red-handed, and they look like a bunch of jerks. So good for these guys. I'm all for this. I don't know if it's really going to accomplish much in the long run, but I think it's better than just going and being a complicit dog. That's what I mean, I think that's how they look at it, too.
Yep. And, in this case, how about getting people not to pay to go to this conference?
Yeah. Yeah. Stop giving them your money. All right. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, that's about it.
All right. I want to thank GoDaddy.com for sponsoring this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. We got a special TechSNAP promo for you guys. Check this out. $50 off of new hosting plans with a free .com if you use the promo code 50host4 when you check out. Okay, did you get all of that? You get 50% off your hosting plan with the free domain. In fact, I don't even know if it has to be a .com. It might be any. domain. This is an amazing deal, and it's something we only have for the TechSNAP audience right now. So go over to GoDaddy.com, the world's #1 domain name registrar. It is go time, and they're going to help you get it done. If you're a small business, if you're a team, or you're an individual, GoDaddy's got something for you. And if you haven't been over to GoDaddy for a while, go check them out. They've been doing a ton of renovations, cleaning things up over there, making it really streamlined, including the new express checkout options and stuff like that. 50 host 4 when you check out will get you 50% off new hosting plans with a free domain. That's pretty awesome. We'll also have that linked in the show notes. You can just click the banner and get on over there. I've been recommending GoDaddy for years, and I'm just so happy to see them continue to make these improvements and refinements on their service and make it even better. And down the road, you'll thank me. When it comes to be a year or two and you need to get back in there, it's so nice to have it all in one spot with GoDaddy's advanced management tools. So go over to GoDaddy.com and use the promo code 50host4 when you check out to get 50% off new hosting plans with the free domain. Pow. Love it. Yep. Thanks to GoDaddy. Okay, well, our next story is, when I saw the headline, I was like, yep, absolutely. We have a new beat on the real true hidden threat to network security. What is it, Alan?
Yes. Management.
Ding.
As in people who wear suits.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I'm wearing it. Ah, damn it. But it's so true.
Open ZFS t-shirt.
I know. That's awesome.
I'm not part of any management.
Well, but you are management of Scale Engine.
Yes. Well, there's no one who I manage. So.
Right. Well, not yet. Just wait, Alan. The empire is building. But how true is this? I mean, this really rings true to you, doesn't it?
It does. And so it's a survey and study done by Strauss Friedberg, which is a company that does it. And it's called Information Security Risk in American Business. And it recently came out. The study shows much what you would expect. Few people actually take security seriously, although everybody claims to care and worry about it. And most people expect the IT experts to somehow magically keep everything secure, while the end users go around sprinkling their sensitive files all over the internet, clicking on every link that comes in an email and opening every attachment.
All doing it under massive budget constraints and last year's technology.
But you know, just thinking that the IT department can somehow stop you from getting a virus if you keep trying to get one.
Well, we have antivirus, don't we? I mean, we have antivirus installed on our computers.
It's responsive, not proactive.
Can't tell how many times I've heard that, though.
Viruses that are known to exist, not the new ones.
I don't understand how I got this. Don't we have antivirus?
Yeah, the antivirus finds viruses after you get infected, and then it gets added.
So let's see here. Nearly half of senior management acknowledge that the C-suite and senior leadership themselves are responsible for protecting their computers. Yet 52% of the same group indicated that they are failing on the job, rating corporate America's ability to respond to cyber threats as a C grade or lower. Risk and file workers differ in their opinions about cybersecurity accountability, with 54% of those respondents saying IT professionals are responsible for putting the right safeguards in place.
Yeah. But, okay, you want the right safeguard? You're not allowed to use email. Yeah. Because you're too stupid.
Well, you know, it is funny how many times that when a user gets something, I have had the blame shifted to IT, like, a lot. Like, they don't, well, how come, so common questions include, besides what about our antiviruses, why didn't the firewall stop this? Like, there is this.
People think firewalls are magic.
Yeah. Like, well, the firewall must screen everything bad, right? No.
It's like, yeah, it's just like, you know, airport security. There's a list of things they check for. If you're doing something that they're not checking for, you're going to get through, right?
Right. And yeah, so I completely agree with this.
Basically down to enumerating badness, with making a list of things that aren't allowed. And when you do that, you're always going to miss stuff. The only other option is whitelisting, right? Only these specific things are allowed, but that hampers productivity too much.
And what's the key thing really here is training. And according to this survey, only 35% of respondents reported receiving regular training on communications and mobile device security from their employers. 37% of employees received training on social media use. That's actually higher than I expected. Employees reported information sharing training just 42% of the time. These are all kind of topics that not only have to be trained, but like you have to update people too.
Right. But some of the biggest ones here, 87% of senior managers frequently or occasionally send work materials to a personal email or cloud account in order to work remotely.
It's the new thumb drive.
Yeah. Well, the worst one is when, you know, this has been going on for years, will just like forward a bunch of files to their Hotmail and then, log into it at a hotel or something and then walk away with it left open and ridiculous things like that.
I like Bat Noob's suggestion in our IRC chat room. He says, maybe this is a great business opportunity. You create up a consulting gig. These must exist, where you just travel around and teach people. This must be something that people
we did one. We talked about one like that. It was an anti-phishing one where you purposely send people in your company a phishing email.
Yeah, you hire a company to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they craft phishing emails, send them to your employees, and then if they fall for it, then instead of a virus, they get the training.
So it's like a new advanced level of auditing in a sense, where you audit and train based on the auditing results.
Auditing the employees and seeing if they're dumb enough to click on the links in an email.
You see the problem. So in reality, the cheapest way to do this would be to empower your IT group to do it themselves. But I guess alternatively, IT groups could try to work with a third party.
Groups are pretty busy.
Yeah.
Consultants are often overpaid.
Yeah.
But
this is usually one you can. This is one that looks good on the books to have spent some money on too. So there's an argument to be made.
But then at the same time, unless you've had a security incident that's actually costed you money, it's pretty hard to get your management to agree to let you spend a bunch of money to hopefully stop somebody from clicking on a link that might compromise a server at some point.
Here's how you do it. Okay.
Waffling near the end.
If you're in IT, just take an afternoon, like on a Friday, and do like a Nessus scan or do a Metasploit against a box, document your results, bring that to management and say, I just did a brief internal audit. I found these problems. I'd like to suggest that we contract out and have somebody do a complete audit. And then that auditing company will come in. They'll find all of this stuff that needs to be fixed. And that's just, more stuff either for you to do or to contract out to them. It becomes like this cycle. But the thing is, you at least begin pushing that agenda forward and you begin working on it. And that's worth something. Yes. It's a tough spot to be in. And, I worked a lot in medical when I was doing contracting work. And their approach to security was, well, you build it secure at the beginning, when you first put it in, and then you never worry about it again. And we all know that's ridiculous. Security is an ongoing thing that you have to keep up on. But this is so that the conversation would often go, well, what do you mean we need to do that? Didn't we spend the money when we bought this system to do that properly? And it's convincing them that it's an ongoing organic thing.
Yeah, it's like, and then, problems were found after the fact. And it needs patches and stuff.
That's why Kali Linux and Backtrack Linux were these self-contained tools that you can just download really quickly, deploy, and generate some of your own reports, get an idea of what your soft spots are, and then figure out what you need to do from there. Yeah. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that one?
A couple other numbers here. 58% of senior management have accidentally sent sensitive information to the wrong person, compared to 25% in the general workforce instead. 51% of senior management and 37% of mid-level management have taken files with them when they leave a job.
Yeah, of course. Got to keep your files, got to keep your contacts.
We make all of our employees sign a non-disclosure agreement where they're agreeing to give any sensitive data back before they leave. But, senior management at big companies apparently don't do that.
Oh, the article has a PDF link towards the bottom of it with some fancy graphics in it. So
that's the actual report.
Yeah, it's like an infograph report. It's
it's a little flashy for my taste, honestly.
Yeah, it's a little light, but it actually is probably the right kind of thing to show management to get them thinking about. It's probably the perfect thing, really, because you know how short their attention spans are.
And I guess one of the other big quotes from there is, bring your own device and the use of personal online accounts have become prevalent in American businesses.
Yeah.
As workers use their personal smartphones, tablets, and preferred cloud providers to stay productive while at work and out of the office. This is opening the door for businesses to encounter new and emerging threats from hackers, malware, and viruses. We saw with, I forget which one of the other cloud providers was it, one of them anyway, where a company can be like, all right, so many of our employees are using this service. We're going to switch to having a corporate account there. And so we're going to give them a list of all of our employees, and they're going to suck all those accounts and put them up under our corporate thing. And then they accidentally sucked up some other people. You remember this? Mm-hmm. This story was a couple months ago anyway. Yeah. And they sucked up some guy who had exchanged a photo with a guy from the company one time. And they sucked his account, and then the corporation was like, well, that guy's not supposed to be here, so they deleted him. But that same thing means that, you could end up sucking in people who aren't supposed to be part of your company, and now they have access to all the the documents and files you put in your, all employees folder or something.
Yeah. It's no good.
Yep.
That's going to lead to...
It's basically the same thing we were talking about last week with the USB sticks. Just people doing this kind of stuff willy-nilly is completely outside the security model, and there's no way for IT to police it other than to tell people you can't do that.
Right. And there's
if you want to work remotely, that's why we have a VPN.
And the point I made last week is there's so many services like Mega Upload and Dropbox and SpiderOak and all these things that are completely outside the control of the sysadmin other than blocking like port 80 and 443.
The worst ones about things like Dropbox is they're completely opaque too. So the IT department has no idea what Dropbox is actually doing as far as security and making sure those files aren't accessible to other people and stuff. Like we've talked about some theoretical dedupe attacks against Dropbox, where you could just get a list of like the hashes of the files or whatever and make Dropbox think you have the same file as someone so that they can read that file. Mm-hmm. Right? If you tell Dropbox, hey, I have this file that I want to upload. Here's the SHA-256 hash or whatever. And Dropbox will be like, oh, I already have that file, so don't bother uploading it. And then you'll be like, hey, Dropbox, I would like to download that file now. And now you have somebody's file.
And really, what's IT's recourse other than aggressive network monitoring, checking for things, talking to the Dropbox service, blocking ports? It just starts this vicious cycle of where the IT has to over-respond, which then actually begins to impact users' productivity for legitimate uses of some of these services. So it all really comes down to training, but even that only gets you so far. Mm-hmm. It's a really tough spot.
Yeah, and it's like sending stuff to your personal email is just never good.
Yeah. Well, tell that to David Petraeus. Oh, wait, you can't because he got fired. Yeah. All right. Well,
anyway,
any other thoughts?
A link to the full PDF if you want to dig into that more.
Yeah, it is good. And
show it to your boss or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. If this is a conversation you need to push forward, that PDF might be the piece of flashy graphics that you could use to print it out and staple it together and put it on somebody's desk. All right, Alan, well, I want to thank Ting.com for sponsoring this week's episode of TechSNAP. Ting is mobile that makes sense. My mobile service provider. They have no contracts, no early termination fees, truly contract free, and you only pay for what you use. With $6 flat a month, you can have mini lines with pooled minutes, and you only pay for what you use on top of that flat $6. And something I wanted to point out is Ting did a survey back about I think it was early December. And they call it the coffee promotion. And here's some of the data. Ting is one of the things I love about Ting, especially somebody who follows this stuff pretty closely, is transparent as a company can be. I'm all for, and Ting is great at this. So here's
they're also good at the internet.
Yeah. They understand what the internet is.
Well, the company behind it, Two Cows, has been on the internet since before most of us.
Oh, yeah. No, very good point. Yeah. And they've been shaking it up for a while. So here were some of the results. 92% of participants would see some savings in their monthly bills by switching to Ting. 87% would save more than $350 over 2 years, enough to pay for a Nexus 5. 82% would save more than $600 over 2 years. And this number was amazing. And they've now validated this twice with two different surveys. 100% of 100% of accounts with over 10 devices would save money. 100% across the board. So if you're a small business, a team with 10 devices or more, all of them would save money. And this is incredible because, first of all, Ting has amazing tools like their dashboard and their awesome customer service, where when you call into Ting's customer service, a real Canadian answers the phone right there, helps you with your problem. They're empowered to solve it. They'll give you their name. They'll give you their number. They're nice. They answer right away. It's awesome. They have a dashboard that makes managing multiple phones amazing. And the way their plans are structured, you only pay for what you use. Your megabytes, your minutes, and your messages are all added up at the end of the month. And whatever bucket you fall into, that's what you pay. It's so straightforward. It's so simple. And as Jupiter Broadcasting grows, this is exactly the kind of model I'd want for my business. So go over to techsnap.ting.com to get started. That's where you're going to get more information. I mean, let's be honest. You want to give credit to the TechSNAP program, right? Right? Right,
For sure.
right. So techsnap.ting.com to get started. You can check out their savings calculator, plug your information there, see how much you would save. Check out their great devices, which you own outright. You're not paying to some sort of subsidized fee that by the time you're at the end of that expensive contract, the phone's completely worthless. And you're not paying into some sort of contract where you're not using all of it. Plus, all of the Ting plans include hotspot and tethering. You just pay for your data usage. And you combine that with their powerful control panel or the Ting app. You can keep exact tabs on where you're at. No add-on charges for voicemail, caller ID, three-way calling, or any of that kind of stuff. And of course, you've got the wonderful, wonderful folks over at Ting to make it all even better. So give them a call. See what they're all about. 1-855-TING-FTW or go to techsnap.ting.com to get started. Find out why I've been using them for a year now, and I couldn't be happier. I'm saving, I mean, I'm not even kidding. I'm saving nearly $100 a month with my Ting bill. And that's
I wish they were available in Canada.
I got 2 phones on it. I got 2 phones on Ting, and I'm saving over $100 a month. It's so awesome.
I still have 9 months left out of a 3-year contract on my current old phone. And
you're hoping
they
maybe
claim I still owe them $85 of the phone.
Ouch.
It's like the phone doesn't even cost that much. Or I looked at it for the Nexus 5, the new Google phone. For some reason, my phone company wants $150 more than Google does for the phone to buy it outright and then not have a contract.
Yeah.
They just pad the price of the phone a whole bunch for what reason?
You know, the thing I think you're going to see over 2014 is a lot of these telcos will try to copy different aspects of the Ting model, but like all imitators, they'll never get it quite right. I mean, this is how Ting is structured. This is how they're built.
I guess the other thing that I was completely not surprised when you said that thing about any plan that has more than 10 devices is going to save huge amounts of money. Because the current telcos, they're like, oh, you're a business. You're not even going to care about how much it costs. You're just going to, and once you're hooked up with one phone company or the other, you're probably never going to change because of the amount of hassle that would be involved.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe now Ting will be able to break some of those.
And Ting is, I mean, the other thing is as a consumer who's in the know, I like putting my wood behind the arrow that's going to bring change to the industry and clean this whole mess up. That's another reason I love Ting. So go get started, techsnap.ting.com, and a huge thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Alan, before we run, we should give a plug. BSD Now is doing a giveaway contest, and people can get a BSD pillow. So tell me about this contest.
So we want more tutorials for our, every week we do a tutorial. This week we did a huge one.
Yeah.
So big there wasn't time for an interview, which we also have every week, except for this week is the first time we haven't, and the first time we plan to not to. Anyway, so we need more tutorials. So we started a little contest. If you go to bsdnow.tv/contest, you can see a picture. Do you have the picture up?
I do. That's a really cool pillow.
Yes. So our friend in Greece hand makes pillows like this.
Awesome.
He can do almost anything you can draw in ASCII art. So if you
are you giving away this pillow?
Yes, we're giving away that one that's in the picture. But you can also order your own if you want like an OpenBSD one or something else.
That is so cool.
Yeah. They take a little while to get made because they're all made by hand.
Do you have one now?
No, but I ordered mine, and it should be here just in time for when the conference the contest ends.
Very cool. That's cool. Well, while we're talking
about how long it takes to ship.
While we're talking about contests, I'll mention too that if you're a Minecraft player, the Faux Show is doing a faux world competition in Minecraft where you build a house and then you fill out the survey where the coordinates are at, and you could win a new Jupiter Broadcasting shirt. So if you're curious about that, go check out Faux Show 158 with Chase and Angela. They talk about the new Minecraft competition. It's pretty cool. There's 2 competitions going on right now, and they're both really cool. A handmade pillow? That's awesome.
Yep.
All right, Alan, is there anything else we want to cover in the news before we run to the feedback?
No, I think that's about it.
All right, then clear the gates, folks, because you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, our first email comes in, I'm going to say Hernan. I think his name is pronounced Hernan. And he's got quite a scenario that he sent in. He's been put in the position now of trying to link 2 different areas together, one in Montreal, right, and one in Toronto. And he wants to potentially connect 2 VMs together. He says, I know Alan would suggest pfSense on each end, although I'm not sure what technologies I should use to create the VPN, like IPsec, PPTP, L2TP. Once pfSense is set up and allows the username and password authentication. I've been studying network books, but the amount of information is astounding. Lots of protocols and technologies that do similar things in different ways. Also, I'm not entirely sure that this setup is valid from a networking point of view. Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. He just wants to make these two machines talk securely, Alan.
Yeah, so what he was talking about doing was he's got this Windows server that the person that's in Montreal and the person in Toronto needs to access it. So his proposed solution was set up a VM on the Windows machine with 2 network interfaces. One bridge to the actual LAN, which is where the VPN connection will come in over from the internet, and then a second adapter, which is one of those host-only adapters, so it only connects to the Windows machine, and that's the network that the VPN users would have access to. So when you VPN in from Toronto to Montreal, you'd only have access to that one Windows server, not the entire Montreal LAN, because apparently that's what he wants. If he wanted it the other way, he could configure it that way. It's just this, and the nice thing about doing a virtual machine like that is it lets him run pfSense instead of being restricted to running the VPN on Windows.
Right.
As far as what to use, PPTP I wouldn't use because it has all kinds of problems. The advantage to it is it's username and password, and the client's built into most OSs and stuff.
And that's essentially it.
But I really recommend against that.
Right.
IPsec and L2TP are hard. pfSense probably makes it pretty easy, but I don't know what you use for a client for that. I guess Windows has a built-in client for L2TP, doesn't it?
I don't know if it does.
I don't even know. What I use for everything is OpenVPN, because I can install it on Windows and I can install it on, BSD or Linux.
Or pfSense comes with it.
Yes, and pfSense comes with it. If I'm out somewhere, I can always download it and install it there if I have to, and then I can VPN in. Generally, OpenVPN doesn't use username and password, though. They use certificates. But you have to look into how you want to set that up. But
yeah, chat room also is coming and recommended OpenVPN. By the way, TechSNAP's live on Thursdays, and we have a chat room embedded over at jblive.tv, also irc.geekshed.net, pound Jupiter Broadcasting, and everybody's in it's consensus. OpenVPN, pfSense if possible. It's going to give you the greatest flexibility down the road. It's going to give you peace of mind security. It's a great project, tons of deployments out there. And like Alan said, with that host adapter, that solves that problem too. Yeah,
and you can always choose to do it the other way instead. Because when you do OpenVPN, you have the choice of doing routed mode or bridged mode. If you do bridged, then even broadcasts go across the VPN, which you probably don't want, but you might. And then, it depends what apps you're trying to make work and what features and so on. But most likely you want a routed one anyway.
Yeah, Silver51 in the chat room points us to Schneier's write-up on PPTP. Great fact. Definitely worth checking out Bruce's site for that.
And don't use that. PPTP is bad.
I will put a link to it actually in the feedback right here. I mean, it's essentially
number 3. How bad is it? Very bad.
This is the problem.
Number 4. Doesn't Microsoft know better? You think so?
No. Well, it's convenient, and that's the problem. It really is.
Number 6. What's the answer? Don't use Microsoft PPTP.
That's a great fact.
Number 8, have you pointed out these flaws to Microsoft? Microsoft has been aware of them for years.
Doesn't care.
Yeah. What does Microsoft have to say about this? We have not received any response from Microsoft.
Yeah. And they were paid to do the analysis, too, which is interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Well, let us know. Email in, let us know how it works out for you. Next question comes in from Dusko, and he writes, hey, guys, Happy New Year, and thanks for the great show. He always do an excellent job. He's an Unfiltered supporter in addition to TechSNAP, and he enjoys BSD now. He says, I'm a system administrator in a university department where I run all of my infrastructure on Red Hat and CentOS. Inspired by the BSD Now show, I configured FreeBSD 9.2 with 2 FreeNAS rack mount servers purchased from IX Systems. I'm wondering if you would have some thoughts about the following 2 questions. Number 1. There is a strong push for taking over a lot of services by a centralized IT organization within the university. In some cases, it makes sense, but in a lot of cases, it results in a decreased service, and unsatisfied users. I maintain a Zimbra server as our email server, and the most recent pressure is to move our department to a centralized Microsoft-based email system. Would you have any advice and arguments I could use in favor of free and open source solutions? In this case, Zimbra.
You can definitely talk about the extra features it has.
Large inboxes are a huge win for Zimbra because it uses a SQL backend for storage of the email inbox. I have worked with clients that just have these massive PDFs that come in over email, and their inbox is 15 gigabytes quickly within the first half of the year. And Microsoft Exchange, it's better in later versions, but
I remember way back in the day where Outlook would break if your PSD file hit 2 gigs.
I think PSD's technical limit is still 2 gigabytes. I think it actually, and they're still using PSD backend storage for Outlook. It's ridiculous.
I just hate anything that stores all your email in one file. I've just always been a huge fan of Maildir and having separate file for each email. It just makes backup and restore so much better.
Yeah, the search capabilities on Zimbra are also superior to the search capabilities on Exchange. And I don't know if security
depends what you want to talk about. It's definitely easier on Linux or BSD to have encrypted volumes. Store all the email that's encrypted, and if you set up backups better, then you could point at that maybe. But yeah, it comes down to if they're better at arguing than you are, then you might live.
All right, here's the second part of his question. I'd like to set up 2 FreeNAS servers so that one has an exact copy of the user data synced as close as possible to real time, although that's not a critical requirement. I noticed that there is a Crash Plan plugin. Would it be a good choice, or would you recommend something else? He says, by the way, I also just wanted to say that IX System provided great support for one of the FreeNAS machines, which had some minor hardware problems. Thanks again for the great show. So, real-time syncing between 2 FreeNAS boxes?
Well, you can schedule a replication between FreeNAS boxes right in the GUI, and if you just make it often enough, that should solve the problem. That's what I do. Like when we do the replication for the PCBSD package repository CDN, we take a snapshot every 15 minutes and then replicate it. And that goes out to a whole bunch of different machines. And because the data coming in is less than our full network bandwidth, it means that the whole 15-minute delta of data only takes a couple of seconds to be sent to the other server.
Yeah, Crash Plan would be better for full offsite.
Yeah, Crash Plan would be sending it offsite. If you just want to have your 2 separate FreeNAS boxes, then the replication system built into FreeNAS should work very well.
Yeah, I would say just use that for sure. You also, you could do something crazy like cross NFS mounts and rsync bash script or shell script, whatever.
Yeah, but with ZFS, you get so much better by using the the ZFS.
That's got to be the way to go.
You're getting, it's completely block level. You're keeping your snapshots intact and not rewriting any data, and so the performance and stuff is just amazing.
So he might have been talking about Crash Plan has the ability to sync between 2 machines too, but I would go with Alan's route. But maybe consider using Crash Plan as an offsite.
But the ZFS is designed for this, and it's really cool. As far as getting it closer to real time instead of the kind of
15-minute window
out of band type thing, I haven't looked into it that much, but the interview we just recorded with the guys from Hybrid Cluster saying they have something kind of like that apparently.
Ooh.
And their software is open source now. So you might have more of an answer on that in the future.
Chat room says that in Outlook 2003, they bumped it beyond the 2 gigabyte limit. And I know, I know, for example, when I was using Outlook 2003 and 2007 and 2010, the file itself could be huge, like I said, 14, 15 gigabytes. But the repair tools were 32-bit, and beyond a certain limit, they could not repair the PSD file. So they allowed the PSD file to get larger, but you couldn't repair it at a certain point. So when the user would be super annoyed that the Outlook was running slow because their inbox was so huge, and they'd Control, Delete, and End task, then it would damage the PSD file, and then you'd have to repair the PSD file, and then if the PSD file was too large, you couldn't repair it. But I don't remember the details of it specifically. One last thing on the Zimbra side of things is I personally like the web interface to Zimbra a lot more. It's a complete and total email client. It's absolutely 100% fully functional. That's a great benefit. And as more and more things go web-based, that's really nice to have too.
Yep.
All right, good luck, Dusko. Moving on, Ryan writes in with an Nginx question. He says, hey guys, I have Apache up and running, configured to do a client-side SSL certificate verification. No cert, no page. Since I've learned on your show that you can put Nginx in front of Apache to speed things up, I did. But I can't seem to find any good information on how Nginx handles client-side SSL certificates. Can you point me in the right direction?
It's right there in the Nginx documentation. The wiki's got a bunch of stuff on it too.
That's the right direction.
So, yeah, we looked into it, and it's pretty simple. What you want there is... I replied to this guy's email. I'm just trying to find it now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't even see you replied. You're on top of it, Alan. You're like...
yeah, so there's the directives SSL_verify_client, which it defaults to off. But if you turn it on, then people can't connect without an SSL certificate, a client-side certificate, or optional will allow it either way, and then you can add if statements or whatever to check whether they're authenticated. Because I use this specifically for my Puppet setup. Only servers with my cert are allowed to download files or talk to my Puppet at all. And then you also have to do SSL_client_certificate, and that points to the CA cert, the private key for the certificate that signs all of the certificates. Sorry, it's a public key, whatever. So basically, you give it. Here's the key that decides whether the key the client's presenting is legitimate or not. And then you can also specify your certificate revocation list, so that when you invalidate somebody's certificate, the Nginx won't accept it anymore. And then optionally, you can also do SSL verified depth. And what that does is say, whether or not you want to allow sub-CAs to issue certificates. Right? If only certificates signed by my Puppet Master, or can my Puppet Master delegate a sub-Puppet Master, and whether I want to accept certificates from that.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah.
Speaking of SSL, our next email came in from Laser Mike. And he says, I thought this was interesting, so I'd pass it along to you. It's called howsmyssl.com, and it rates your browser's TLS capabilities and spots possible crypto problems. It rates Chrome and Safari as all good, i.e. with bad and improving rating, and Firefox with 2 bad ratings. He says, I like Firefox. I wish it was beyond criticism.
Firefox only gets 1 bad rating.
So in Chrome, I get your SSL client is probably okay. On Safari, an older Safari on the Mac, you got problems, and I got a big red. You got issues. This is just so it goes through. It checks session ticket support, version, TLS compression, beast vulnerability. That's what my Safari on the old Mac was.
So on my Firefox by default, the only one that's bad is the insecure cipher suites. Specifically, it says it allows SSL, RSA, FIPS with 3DS, UDE, CBC, SHA. It says this cipher was meant to die with SSL 3.0 and is unknown safety. So I went through and disabled a bunch of ciphers and then refreshed the page, and it said I was all fine. The problem was then when I went to go to my online banking, it didn't work.
Oh, yeah.
So the whole page loads except for this one JavaScript file that comes from a different subdomain at my bank, which is, I can tell from the subdomain, it's actually the old version of their online banking system that they've retired. But apparently this old server's still up, and they pull one JavaScript file from it still.
Of course.
And it runs an old 128-bit SSL thing. And when I didn't allow that old cipher, the page failed to load.
Yikes. So what are you going to do? You got to turn it back on. Yep. So if you want to check your browser, go to howsmyssl.com. Howsmyssl.com. We'll have it linked in his email, too, if you want to read it. This is kind of cool. You can throw your different machines at it. If you got an older machine with an older browser, you can see it's not working that good.
It turns out, I think the cipher that my bank was using isn't the one they're specifically complaining about. I just disabled a whole bunch of them that I didn't want to allow. Gotcha. And I was a little too broad with that. So by just disabling the one FIPS one, then Firefox suddenly goes to your SSL client is probably okay with green everywhere.
Very nice. I like that you say probably, because they don't want to say for
never
sure.
say yes, exactly. And importantly, my online banking still works.
That's nice. All right. Well, so Rob wrote in. He says, hello, Chris and Alan. Love TechSNAP and all the Jupiter broadcasting shows. Looking forward to sporting my new JB t-shirt on the catwalk soon. I'm a software developer by day, but after hours, I help a couple of small business owners, friends of mine, with their IT infrastructure. These are 2 to 3 person shops with modest needs, file servers, and virtual desktops for remote employees mostly. My question is this. Why are low-end tower servers so much more expensive than mid-range or even high-end desktops? For example, on the manufacturer's site, a quad-core Intel Xeon machine with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a dual 1 terabyte hard drive costs north of $2,200. By comparison, an Intel i7 desktop with similar specs from the same manufacturer costs about half that. Where is all that extra money going? I understand server components are designed for always-on operation, but the machine that will probably outlive its usefulness in 5 years. Is it likely to matter in that case? And more to the point, am I better off putting Linux or FreeBSD on a desktop machine and helping my friends save money? Thanks, keep up the great work. What do you think about these? So have you seen like these like HP has and Dell has these towers that are really just truly desktops, but maybe they put like an Intel server board in there, a Xeon Proc, maybe a server NIC.
It probably has ECC RAM, which is more expensive. It's probably using enterprise-grade hard drives, which are more expensive. But that cost looks a little off to me.
So I'll say this, in terms of like HP and a lot of others, they actually will, so say they're going to buy 10 million Hitachi hard drives. They will have Hitachi or whoever, I'm just pulling a name out of my butt, run a line specifically for their enterprise-grade products. And then they'll buy all those ones, and they sell those in the enterprise grade. And then Hitachi makes the same parts, but they have just a different set of standards potentially. That's one thing that can be a component here. Getting the Xeon chip, Intel puts a premium price on that because it's server grade. And like Alan said, ECC memory. Here's my thing. In my experience, whenever I've walked into a shop that had a PC as their server, I cringe and I want to run out of there as fast as possible. Whenever I walk in there and it's server grade hardware, I'm generally a little more comfortable. First of all, we're talking an entirely different support contract. Not just in how long it's covered, but when you call a person, you get an entirely different category of person.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the cost of the server. That's why it's so much more because, it's the fact that there's a warranty. With the server grade stuff, most of the time the warranty includes shipping both ways, whereas the desktop one won't, and things like that.
And sometimes, like in the case of Dell, this may not be the case anymore, but back then, enterprise-grade support was in Texas. Consumer-level support was in India, right? And
things like that.
When you're under the gun and you got to get something fixed. And then lastly, like you mentioned here, Rob, you're working on this after hours. You're working on this for a favor for friends. So they got to stop being cheap, number one. If they need a server, they got to pay for a server. Number two, you probably want to take every step possible available to you to reduce the amount of time they need you. And if that means they spend an extra $600 on a server-grade machine so that way you get one less phone call a year, I think it's worth it, personally, if your time is short.
Honestly, what you should do is go to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and ask for a quote for the same system, and I bet it's not as bad.
Yeah. I mean, what Rob's picking up on is there is just a premium that some of these guys throw in there just to put the server label on it, and you do pay for some of that.
I didn't spend that much, and I got a quad-core Xeon short-depth rack-mount server. I only put 8 gigs instead of 16 gigs in the machine, and I didn't put hard drives, obviously, but still, adding the extra RAM and the hard drives wouldn't have made that machine come out to $2,200.
No. Yeah. So it could be
it's got 4 gigabit NICs and lots of fancy features.
Yeah, and there's certain companies that are famous for overcharging, especially on the low end.
A lot of times it's just to do with, you're getting all this extra stuff that you might use, and maybe you don't get.
And sometimes they include nice things like, management ports and things like that too, or redundant cooling.
That's the full IPMI.
Yeah,
and stuff, and
that's worth it too.
The fans aren't quite hot swappable, but that's because I bought the short depth case. In a regular Supermicro case, all the fans are hot swappable. So. And I guess when you're looking at towers, it's a little different, but IX Systems does tower servers too.
We got so many great emails this week. Thank you guys very much. We didn't even get to all of them. Doesn't mean we won't ever read it. It might just mean we're holding it for when we need to fill in some gaps. But if it's urgent, you can always send it in again. And now we need more emails, which we're trying to keep on top of these as best we can. So send in your questions to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com. Or even better, if you really want to make sure we see it, either use the contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website and choose TechSNAP from the dropdown. Or, pro tip, start a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. I check that several times a day before every TechSNAP episode. So I'm in there before TechSNAP goes on air 3 or 4 times that morning, checking it to see if there's any threads and stuff like that. And that's a great way to get in front of me. And often the community's awesome and jumps in there and answers the question way ahead of time, which is great too, and gives you links and all kinds of stuff. So it's pretty cool. So TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com. Send your questions in. We'd love to answer them. But Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about. Then give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And this first one was raising quite a ruckus in that subreddit. Yahoo malware turned European computers into Bitcoin slaves. This is according to The Guardian.
Well, the malware wasn't from Yahoo, but it was served
right?
So basically, somebody sent in some ads to the Yahoo advertising network, and they were approved without enough testing, and turns out they were actually exploiting an older Java vulnerability. So anybody who went to the front page of Yahoo and had outdated version of Java installed might have been infected, and their computer turned into a Bitcoin bot.
Yeah, so some of the malware would turn PCs into Bitcoin bots. It ran from December 31st to January 3rd on the European sites.
It only affected Europe. If you were in North America or Asia, you wouldn't have been affected.
Or Macs or on mobile, you weren't affected. It is only affecting Windows boxes too. Foxit IT is the Dutch cybersecurity firm which first disclosed the vulnerability to the public. They estimated there were around 27,000 infections every hour the malware was live on the site, and that they say that almost 2 million computers were infected.
Exposed, not infected.
It says infected, but...
Does it?
Yeah, it does. But I don't know. I mean... Who knows? I mean,
that might be one of the most successful malware spams ever.
I think it must be assuming that everybody who was running Windows was infected with some of them.
If you had up-to-date Java, you weren't vulnerable. So,
yeah.
Although, you know, we've seen the stats, and most people don't have up-to-date Java. So,
yeah, it's a cybersecurity firm. That word right there makes me suspicious. But yeah.
But yes, at least 2 million people were exposed to it. Although we don't know how many of those computers actually got infected.
A lot of machines grinding to a halt doing some Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
Okay, now this next one in the roundup is a PDF. What's this about?
Oh, this is a really funny article from it was in the Usenix magazine, but it was published by James Mickens, who's a researcher at the Distributed Systems Group at Microsoft.
Yeah.
But he says, you know, he'll be going through his email, and he'll find a message, a new talk announcement, and it's like Vertex-based elliptic curve cryptography on N-way Bojangle spaces.
Whoa.
And he's like, what? And it goes on and it gets all kinds of just funny things he says. It's really humorous, but it's mostly talking about how a lot of security researchers are focusing on these really exotic niche attacks because that's what's cool to research. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's regular password stuff where most people's problems are, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, Java exploits and stuff. That's what's infecting people, not, you know, the type of stuff only the NSA can pull off.
Right. It's so much more mundane on whole.
Some of the greatest ones here. It is well known that five-way secret sharing has been illegal since the Protestant Reformation. However, using recent advances in polynomial time, Bojangles projections, we demonstrate how a set of peers who are frenemies can exchange up to 5 snide remarks that are robust to Bojangles' chosen plaintext attacks. It's like, I feel like these emails start in the middle of a tragic but unlikely to be interesting opera.
Well put. Funny. Well, bad news, Alan.
And then he goes on to talk about like how he asked his friend why he's doing a triathlon, and his friend's like, triathlon's a good exercise. And it's like, that's true, assuming that you've made a series of bad life decisions that result in you being hunted by an amphibious Ronald McDonald.
What? See, I think this is the kind of thing that you need somebody out there talking about this, because it is not getting enough attention. These are
so in general, I think that security researchers have a problem with public relations, right? Security people are like smarmy teenagers who listen to goth music. They're full of morbid and detailed monologues about the pervasive catastrophes that surround us, but they're much less interested in the practical topics of what people should do, because they're inevitably killed by ravens and a shortage of black mascara.
Well, he's right.
Yeah, so it's like, websites are amazing, but don't click on that link. and your phone can run all these amazing apps, but many of these apps are evil.
Right. Stealing your data.
And if you order a Russian bride on Craigslist, you might get a confused Filipino man who doesn't like being shipped in a box. And also, later on, it's got one of my favorite terms ever. It's like, you might be Mossaded upon.
Yeah. Get Mossad. Yeah.
Yes. And he details some of the threats. It's like, threat, an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend breaking into your email account and publicly releasing your correspondence with the My Little Pony fan club. Solution, get a stronger password.
Yep.
Organized criminals breaking into your email account and sending spam using your identity. Solution, stronger passwords and common sense. Don't click on unsolicited links for herbal Viagra ads that result in keyloggers and sorrow. But the threat, the Mossad doing Mossad things to your email account. Solution, magical amulets. Fake your own death, move into a submarine, and also you're still going to get Mossaded upon.
At least he's...
And it goes on. It's really funny, and I recommend reading it.
There you go, from a Microsoft researcher.
It's actually very true. And, while research into all these more exotic things like, that GPG attack we heard about recently where, if you can monitor somebody's electrical power usage and the noise their computer makes, you could start to decode their key if you can send them emails that they decrypt automatically. But at the same time, it's like, well, what we really need is better solution to prevent people from stealing your Twitter account or breaking email, right?
We need an answer to the password. Yeah, as Bill Gates always says. So speaking of passwords, actually passwords weren't leaked, but emails were in the OpenSUSE of forum hacks. This is one of those things where I guess they were using a single sign-on system, so that was managing the passwords. But records...
So passwords would have been leaked if it wasn't for the fact that they are actually using an external authentication system with their vBullet.
Called Access Manager from NetIQ.
Yep.
Yeah. Which has gotten them in some trouble because it's a proprietary system and people were like, what?
Well, so's vBulletin technically, but...
Yeah. So some user data was stored in convenience, like user email addresses.
vBulletin has the whole database, and it has a password field that's just full with gibberish instead of the usual stuff. And then to authenticate you, it would send your password attempt off to the NetIQ server, and that would return either let you in or don't. And so because that isn't stored in the same SQL database, they couldn't compromise that, and they compromised vBulletin.
Now it's time
it seems like just a good kind of solution, even like an open source one of it. And even if you don't have an actual need for single sign-on, just abstracting the password authentication phase out of the forum database so that if the forum software is compromised and they manage to dump that whole database, that the passwords are actually stored somewhere else, just so they're not in the same SQL database, or even if it's just the SQL user whose details are printed in the config file for vBulletin, because out of necessity, doesn't have access to where the passwords are stored. On top of better hashing. vBulletin doesn't have very good hashing, honestly.
So I guess another tip here would be, if you're using vBulletin, take some precautions.
Well, in particular, they were using vBulletin 4, which has been like end of life for a while, I think. But yes, even 5, the FreeBSD forum switched away from vBulletin because there were exploits that weren't being fixed quickly enough or at all. There was an exploit going around and the vBulletin guys couldn't figure out how it worked.
Oh, well, that's reassuring.
I think they eventually got it, but for a while there, it's like, we know there's an exploit, so you should really lock down your vBulletin, but we don't know how they're doing it yet.
Oh, man.
And, they had to do like postmortems on some forums that got hacked in order to try to figure it out.
Alan, I feel a need to get poetic on the TechSNAP program. I don't think it's ever happened in the roundup or even on TechSNAP at all, but in the roundup here, we have linked, I hacked for 40 days and I hacked for 40 nights. Where did you find this?
It's a Saturday Morning Breakfast Cartoons comic.
Okay.
But in this case, they hack the truth machine, being the universe. And they're like, I don't recognize these numbers, but for some reason I know they're special. And they start changing them, and then the universe around them starts changing. I don't know, it's a really interesting poem. I just thought I'd throw that in there when I came across it the other day.
And it's illustrated, too, which makes it a good read.
Yep.
So it's got pictures.
The only Saturday morning breakfast cartoon I've seen that's not colored as well. So, but it's longer than usual, so that makes sense.
Find a link to that in the roundup. Very good. All right, next story I tossed in here. Speaking of Zimbra, we were just talking about this in our feedback segment. There is a remote execution vulnerability in Zimbra, and you might need to update. The unspecified vulnerability affects the Zimbra collaboration server 7.2.5 and earlier, and 8.0 through 8.05. It's labeled as critical, and you should check it out if you're running Zimbra. I wanted to put an FYI notice out there for any Zimbra admins we have in the audience. Okay, Alan. So this is a story about a $500 security screw-up. That actually doesn't sound that bad.
So in this one, it was a security researcher, so this made it really embarrassing for him.
Okay, that's bad.
And he was doing some work, and he used Amazon EC2 with his software. And the software he was building, he posted up on GitHub because he wants it to be available to everybody. And he made very careful to use git ignore and stuff to make sure he didn't post his config file that has his Amazon keys in it. But he also made a little test file that had the configuration in line. And when he was done, he commented out that configuration and then didn't realize that he committed this file to GitHub that had his public and private keys for Amazon. And so someone else was able to log in and order the big fat Amazon instances with the graphics cards. And probably, I think they were doing Litecoin mining on it.
Love it. Love it.
Running 10 instances at 2 of the different regions that he wasn't using.
Wow. If he
when he logged in and looked at his virtual machines, he saw they were all off. But he had to manually switch to like Ireland and see, oh, look, there's 10 of them.
That's pretty clever.
But what happened was Amazon sent him an email being like, hey, your keys are public on GitHub.
Oh, look at them checking it out.
Likely was triggered by the compromise of his account, rather than them just publicly searching GitHub all the time to see if when people do that. Although I bet they would catch a lot of accounts preemptively just by constantly searching GitHub for things that look like Amazon keys.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good idea on Amazon's part. Yep. And he's actually really lucky he only walked away with a $500 bill. I mean, that's... Yeah,
mostly because Amazon noticed and informed him time that he was able to catch it. Because they were running up, he was paying per hour times 10 instances, so it would have added up a lot faster, or it could have been really bad if it happened, over Christmas while he was away from his email for a couple of days, maybe. Yeah.
I fell backwards accidentally into a $300 EC2 bill one time.
Forgot to turn something off.
Yep. So you know what you do when you got a bad reputation? Just ask Xfinity, you rebrand, and that's what Intel's doing with McAfee. Remember, Intel bought McAfee a few years back, and they're rebranding it to Intel Security to make you feel better because, well, let's face it, they've had some screw-ups recently. And they...
Not just that, they're trying to distance themselves from John McAfee.
Right.
Who's,
bit of a showboat.
Kind of a cross between like a Tony Stark and a Charlie Sheen.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. So there you go. So look for Intel Security coming to a product near you soon, I'm sure. Yep. And remember that it's still McAfee, regardless of what they tell you. Yep. Now, warning, Alan, this might harm your computer just reading it.
Yes. So this is a PDF, a research paper from some guys, and it's actually titled, Reading This May Harm Your Computer, The Psychology of Malware Warnings. And they're doing research into, the warnings that pop up, say this file might be potentially dangerous. That's not specific enough. And, often it pops up so often and stuff that people just check the box, don't show this anymore, or just ignore it and click through it. And so they're looking at how can we change the wording of these warnings so people will actually pay attention? Rather than just saying this software is potentially harmful.
What can we actually
It doesn't actually say anything, right? It's like, this software could steal your banking information or something, different, more specific things. And they get into a lot of the different versions that they kind of tested against people and did like focus groups and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And they looked at a lot of the different stuff. Part of it is really down to, we need to be more specific and put the warnings in the right place and not just fatigue the user by showing the warning all the time. Right?
That is a challenge. It just means they got to make more intelligent.
This is really the wording of that message is more about psychology and communication,
human behavior,
than it is about software developers.
Yep.
Who are usually the people that write the warnings.
Yeah.
But it's like the one on Skype. Every time you receive a file, it's like this file could potentially be harmful. And while at the same time, I don't want them like looking at the file extension and trying to decide what it could be.
Yeah, you don't want them to analyze it, but
a .jpeg isn't that harmful,
right? But a .exe or
and so on.
Yeah, doesn't take much, and some programs are smart. Outlook has actually gotten a little bit better about that over the years.
What I remember way back in the day, though, was the double extension thing, where you could make like a .txt.exe, and then you double click it, and it would not open in Notepad; it would run the virus, and things like that. And so, bad string manipulation and things like that. But yeah, upgrading those warnings so it doesn't say that when it's a picture, or like, hey, this is an exe. It's extremely dangerous compared to this is an unknown file that we don't recommend you open, or whatever, and so on. And they get into what the different sayings might make sense, and they go like into a level of detail. Being psychologists, not understanding how the computer side of it would work. Talking about, saying X number of people in your local area have been bitten by this.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, how would you tell that in a malware warning at the same time? And, unless you know it's the malware, then how do you word that message properly, right?
Yeah.
So it brings up a lot of interesting issues.
What is your reaction to the MPAA joining the W3C? What do you think about this? This was just announced this week.
Well, it's public for everybody to join, right? So.
Yep. Yeah, but people are reacting badly to this. TechDirt wrote an article. They titled it, "Not Cool. The W3C has been at the forefront of open standards and open internet for many years, obviously. So it's somewhat distressing to see it announced this morning that the MPAA has now joined the group. After all, it was not that long ago the MPAA flat out tried to break the open internet by imposing rules like SOPA. So you have a SOPA and DRM proponent that is joining...
Well, the W3C is already going to put DRM in the HTML5 so that everybody can have Netflix.
Yeah. Which Tim Berners-Lee has even come out in support of, which was surprising.
Right.
Tim Berners-Lee said support of DRM and HTML5 seems to be based, on the short-sighted idea that the web needs legitimacy of entertainment industry. I misread their quote here. Yeah. I've seen a pretty strong reaction. This is one of these things where I take a wait and see approach. It doesn't sound good on the face of it, but I don't know if there's a lot you can draw conclusion-wise yet. All right, we have a story in the roundup about OpenSSL's website being defaced, right?
Yes. So the OpenSSL website was defaced. At first, they thought the attack was a little more exotic. They actually thought somebody managed to break through like the hypervisor. So the OpenSSL site runs in a virtual machine, and they thought someone had managed to break through from another virtual machine at the same host or something. Turns out what actually happened was bad admin password on the control panel for the hosting company.
Oh, go figure.
And they managed to break in and just get console access to the VM and compromise it. So, there's something to think about. It's like, so you have the hosting provider and you're renting a virtual machine from them, and you set a really strong password, but if the admin password for the control panel is not strong, and somebody manages to brute force it, keylog it, or get it somehow, then they can log in and have console access to all your machines.
Yeah.
Depending how it's set up, generally if someone else is going to have console access to my machine, I tend to make a bunch of config changes to try to harden the console.
Sure.
Like by default, if you boot in single user mode, you just get a shell, right? But you can make some changes on the TTYs file in FreeBSD on Linux. I think it's your init tab to say that even in single user mode, you need the root password. It removes your ability to reset the root password, but I'm not going to forget my root password, so I don't want someone else to be able to reset it.
Just be sure those aren't your famous last words.
They can start it on a live CD unless you're running everything encrypted.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, in this case, the OpenSSL website is just the website. So, there was no compromise of the source code repository, which is audited anyway, and so on.
Very good, sir. Very good. All right, well...
I figured nobody hacked into, like, nobody exploited the server it was running on itself, because like their entire website is flat files. It's like HTML and TXT files. There's no code that gets executed.
Right.
So it's not like you can compromise WordPress and get access to their server.
Yeah.
So it was very strange to see their website defaced.
Good point. Well, good news for democracy. The Federal Elections Commission, the government agency that keeps track of money raised each term by candidates in the political action committees, is highly vulnerable to intrusions and data breaches, according to a recent audit that discovered significant deficiencies in the IT security program. Surprise! A government agency has significant deficiencies. This audit is available as a PDF. It surfaced online this week. It was administered by the Maryland-based Leon Sneed and Company earlier this month. The report notes that the FEC must fundamentally change its governance and management approach and adopt a risk-based IT security program that meets the best practices laid out by the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. Sounds like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit over at the Federal Election Commission, Alan. Good news. Surprise. All right. And that is a great article over on the Threat Post if you guys want to read it. We put links to all of the Roundup stuff in the show notes. And then lastly, the last entry in the Roundup this week comes from Twitter.
Yes, this is from Brian Krebs, one of our favorite security researcher guys. And he just was making a note that he'd been told by a bunch of researchers and readers of his site that the Asperox botnet has been pushing Krebs on security themed malware.
Oh, he's made it.
Yeah.
That's how you know you've made it, right?
Yeah. When they're imitating your site when they're writing malware.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good that he's letting folks know.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not following him. How crazy is that? I'm going to follow him right now.
Yep.
And I'm going to retweet that S too. Pow. Well, there you go. Okay, that's the Roundup now. The Roundup is available for further reading on your own. And you can help shape the Roundup by going over to links.techsnap.tv, submitting stories, and voting them up. By the way, don't forget, we do have the TechSNAP Hall of Shame, but I think it requires to have 7 upvotes before we admit it. And Snapchat came in at 6 votes. And, you know, that you got to factor in there's down votes in there, too, so it has to fight against that. But once we put somebody in the Hall of Shame, it is forever shamed on the TechSNAP program and embroidered right on... Embroidered? I don't know if that's the right word, but it is sealed right on our subreddit for the remainder of time. And we have 10 entries right now. We haven't tipped over to 11 yet. But you can help. If you see something, just tag it with Hall of Shame in our subreddit and then try to get enough votes to make it into the show, and then we'll do the indoctrination in the Roundup in a future episode of TechSNAP. Now, don't forget, TechSNAP is live on Thursdays over at jblive.tv. You can join us Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is...
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
Pow. Also available in audio only over at jblive.info, where we've got a high 128 stream and a low, I think it's like a 64 kilobit stream, which works pretty good on mobile. Might even be a little lower than that, or also works good if you're just in any bandwidth-constrained environment. And then, of course, TechSNAP is available for download every Thursday evening Pacific time, Friday mornings pretty much everywhere else in the world. And you can subscribe to the RSS feeds. Then you automatically get this show when we release new episodes, which is every single week for 144 weeks in a row. Boomsies! And if you enjoy the TechSNAP program, not only can you help us out by patronating our sponsors, patronating our sponsors, but you can also review and rate us on anywhere you caught this show. Stitcher, iTunes, wherever. It helps other people discover the show, because when you put your rating and your review in there, it juices up the algorithms for the search. So when people search for a sysadmin podcast, hopefully they'll come across the TechSNAP show. And then lastly, don't forget, we want your emails. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, pop the contact link, choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, and send it in. And we'll probably read it on a future edition of the TechSNAP show. Alan, anything else we need to cover before we run?
No, that's it for this week.
Okay, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.